وكفى وصلاة وسلاما على النبي المصطفى وعلى آله وأصحابه وأزواجه أمهات المؤمنين أهل الصفا والوفاء. أما بعد، وقلنا ومن تأمل هذا الموضع حق التأمل علم أن حسن الظن بالله وحسن العمل نفسه، فإن العبد إنما يحمله على حسن العمل حسن ظنه بربه أن يجازيه على أعماله ويثيبه ويتقبلها منه. فالذي حمله على العلم والعمل حسن الظن، فكلما حسن ظنه بربه حسن عمله، وإلا فحسن الظن مع اتباع الهوى عجز، كما في حديث الترمذي والمسند من حديث شداد بن أوس عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أنه قال: الكيس من دان نفسه وعمل لما بعد الموت، والعاجز من اتبع نفسه هواها وتمنى على الله. وبالجملة فحسن الظن إنما يكون مع انعقاد أسباب النجاة، وأما مع انعقاد أسباب الهلاك فلا يأتي إحسان الظن. So, Ahmed, take out your phone. And I need you to read that first paragraph on page 63, if you may, inshallah. Loud and clear for us, brother. You guys have the book in the back? Can you give it to the... You have the book?
Let me see. You said 63?
Yeah.
First paragraph?
The first page.
First page, okay. Whoever thoroughly contemplates over the aforementioned shall come to know what having good thoughts about Allah happens with performing good actions. Undeniably, the servant is drawn to good actions by his good thoughts about his Lord, and that he shall recompense him for his actions, reward him for them, and accept them from him. The driving factor that led him to good action was the good thoughts.
No. Keep going.
And the more his thoughts excel, the better his actions become. On the other hand, good thoughts alongside and adherence to whims and desires are a defective weakness, as has been reported in At-Tirmidhi and the Musnad of Al-Imam Ahmad, in a narration on the authority of Shaddad bin Awas, who reported from the Prophet, who said, the astute one is he who holds himself to account and performs actions for the life after death. As for the helpless one, he is someone who allows his soul to follow its desire and has false hope in Allah. In summary, good thoughts can only be actualized when attached to the means of success. As for the reasons of destruction, they can never result in good thoughts. If it is said, no, rather is it possible, as good thoughts can be based on the expansive forgiveness of Allah, His mercy, pardon, and generosity, and that His mercy has overtaken His anger, and that inflicting a punishment will not benefit him, nor will His pardon harm him. It could also be said, the matter is you have said, and Allah is even far more elevated than that and more noble and generous.
Right. جزاك الله خيرا. نعم. فيقول رحمه الله تعالى: من تأمل هذا الموضع الذي ساء فيه الفهم عند أولئك, those people who do not contemplate the situation, الذي ساء فيه فهم عند أولئك, those who had the misunderstanding of the assumption of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وحق التأمل علم حسن الظن بالله وحسن العمل بنفسه. So when someone says, I assume the best of Allah, means that they act upon the best in that assumption. Because Imam Hassan al-Basri said, there is no way someone would say, I always assume the best of Allah, but I do not act upon that. How can a person be a complete Muslim or a complete believer in Islam but they don't act upon the belief that they believe in. It doesn't correlate together. Like he said, it's a fool who says, I have the utmost belief in Allah, but yet does not act by the acts that they are told by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and does not stay away from the forbidden that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had told him. It's a hesitant belief. There is no fundamental belief system for them. One little small thing and it could easily phase that. لذلك إحسان الظن بالله أن يعمل بالظن بما يظن به. So assuming the best of Allah is acting upon that assumption towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فبمعنى أنه كلما حسن العمل حسن الظن. So as long as they act upon righteousness, their assumption will strengthen towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ولهذا المؤمن في قبض روحه يكون فيه من الأنس والراحة والبشر بخلاف غيره الذي يقول. So then you will see those people, they'll be in complete peace with themselves. Right? So it's one of the things that people, when they say Islam is peace, that's actually false. Islam is submission towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Muslimin means those who submit their will towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely. When we say Islam is peace, it's only the peace that's found within yourself and the heart towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what it means, tuma'nina. That's what it means, it's peace. It's peace within self. With yourself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your connection with Allah. That's when a person finds peace. And that starts with the assumption of Allah, assuming the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then Ibn al-Qayyim said, so you do not be amongst those who regret it later on. Like those who said what? قال رب ارجعون لعلي أعمل صالحا فيما تركت. قال كلا. Those who will say, oh Allah, bring me back. So you don't be amongst those who will regret everything they had done in this world, and they will plead to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bring me back. لعلي أعمل صالحا, so I can act upon righteousness in this world. So I can redeem myself for everything that I have done after they've seen the punishment. خلاص. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, كلا. Never. Indeed, you will not go back. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to those people who will come on those days and after they see the severe punishment from Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about them, حتى إذا جاء أحدهم الموت قال رب ارجعون. They will come in the face of death and they said, oh Allah, please return us. Please let us try again. Let us start over again. لعلي أعمل صالحا, so that I may act upon goodness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, كلا كلمة هو قائلها. It is a command that he had passed. كلمة هو قائلها ومن ورائهم برزخ اليوم حتى يوم يبعثون. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and it is between them is a barzakh until the day they are brought back. خلاص. قضي الأمر. The command has been passed. إن الله قد حكم بين العباد. Allah has passed His judgment between His servants. So before we fall into that, so the goal is to do what? What He's telling them, in order to assume the best of Allah. How do you assume the best of Allah? First, as long as you act upon righteousness, and you pile that up, and you continue doing good upon good upon good, then you will have the assumption of the best towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فقال فالمؤمن الذي حسن عمله يرتفع حسن الظن بحسب ارتفاع العمل وكثرته. The believer is the one who increases in acting upon righteousness up until their assumption of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also increases with them. ومن ساء عمله ساء ظنه ولهذا في الخاتمة يظهر مثل هذا الأمر. But for those who assume the worst of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is because what? Their actions are evil, their actions are wrong, their actions anger Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then they will assume the worst of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then they will be amongst those who will come fil khatimah at the end of time or the moment of their death, and they will say, قال رب ارجعون, oh Allah, return us back. لعلي أعمل صالحا فيما تركت. كلا. So then I can act upon goodness and righteousness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, never. It's too late now. So في الإحسان الظن, as we said in Musnad Imam Ahmad, في الترمذي, in a narration of Shaddad ibn Aws, when he reported to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Al-kaysu man dana nafsahu wa amila lima ba'da al-maut." So he said, the astute, one is the one who holds himself to account and performs action for the life after death. Is the one who works for the hereafter. Their goal is the hereafter. Their seeking is the hereafter. Those are the ones who are assuming the best of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is the ones who will act upon it. So for one that's not seeking nothing but this world and seeking what they can benefit from this world, خسر الدنيا والآخرة. They have lost this world and the hereafter. So he said, in order to assume the best, act upon goodness and pile up in goodness, and then you will assume the best of Allah. But for those who assume the worst of Allah, then those are the ones who act upon nothing but evil and wrong. صح? So then, as the hadith of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, when he said, "Al-kaysu man dana nafsahu wa amila lima ba'da al-maut." He said, the astute is the one who acts upon everything that will benefit them in the hereafter, not in this world. Those are the ones who gain the true victory from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he said, وَالْعَاجِزُ مَنِ اتَّبَعَ نَفْسَهُ هَوَاهَا وَتَمَنَّى عَلَى اللَّهِ الْأَمَانِي. So he said, as for the helpless one, is the one whom what? Is the one who allows his soul to follow its desires and has false hope in Allah. The al-ajiz, that's the one that's helpless. And when someone said, he said, I tried everything that I can. That's back to the question that the questioner asked, correct? When he told Imam Qayyim, he said, I did everything that I can to stay away from this act. But I still cannot hold myself. لذلك هو العاجز. He's the helpless one. And that goes back to his assumption of Allah. He lost hope in Allah to begin with. When you say that question in that kind of manner, saying that I tried everything that I can, but there's nothing that can help me. Meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even Allah cannot help me. صح? ما لا تبقى السؤال. That's the origin of the question. That's the root of it. When you say, I tried everything that I can, but there's nothing that can help me. خلاص, to begin with, you in that kind of position, you've lost hope in Allah. And you assume the worst of Allah. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even Allah cannot help me. Astaghfirullah. لذلك Ibn al-Qayyim said that is a failed question. You cannot say, I did everything that I can, but you didn't even cover every corners of your actions. Even from that question, that shows why you've been failing. Why you haven't been successful in removing that calamity away from your life. Because you did not act upon what you assume. When you think you assume of Allah. You say you assume the best of Allah, but you did not act upon that. نعم. الكيس من دان نفسه. فقال, the astute is the one who holds himself accountable. نعم. من يدين نفسه. صحيح. So he was asking, the word dan means to blame yourself, but it's like to hold yourself accountable for their actions. The people who hold themselves accountable for every action and for everything that they do in their lives, seeking the hereafter. So they make sure that every action that they take in their lives is of value. And then when they fall into the wrongs, they hold themselves accountable for it. For that's what I meant by al-kaysu man dana nafsa. And that goes back to something that we used to say all the time. Umar ibn al-Khattab said what? حاسبوا أنفسكم قبل أن تحاسبوا. Judge yourselves before you are to be judged. وزنوا أعمالكم قبل أن توزنوا. And weigh your actions before they are weighed in the day of judgment. Before the scale of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala weighs them for you. You yourself will judge yourself before anybody else. And similarly on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, يَوْمَ تَطَيَّرُ الصُّحُفِ. That's the first thing that's going to happen. The scrolls for everyone's actions and their whole entire life will be thrown on top of them on the day of judgment. And then they will tell them what? اقرأ كتابك كفى بنفسك اليوم عليك حسيبا. Read your own book. كفى بنفسك. You yourself is enough to hold yourself accountable on this day. You yourself will be the one to judge yourself before you are to be judged. You will look at your entire life. Everything will be given to you. A whole scroll. فيقول لك اقرأ كتابك. Read it. ماشي طيب. We will stop it on here today.